Welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host, Erin James, the channel that brings you your team every single day, guys. We've got obviously updates and news and opinion from today's AGM, which I think, we can all agree is a little bit of a farce. Questions just again, even some of the questions today were good. They were kind of batted away by the board. We've also got some news on a possible departure of a striker in January. Yes, it's been reported that one of Rangers' three strikers could well be on the move in January. We'll talk about that as well. So hang on for that story coming later in the video. Right, we're going to start off. We're talking about the AGM. Yes, John Gilligan, everyone's favourite grandpa, was there as the chairman of the football club, giving the opening announcement. And the people in attendance there today, interesting bunch of directors and club officials. I'm trying to stay as calm as possible on this one and as neutral as possible on this one. So who was there? Who was actually there today? James Taylor, obviously there, who Chief Financial Officer. Kareem Varani was there as well, the Chief Marketing Officer. Niels Coppen was there. Philippe Clement was also there as well. A number of directors were in attendance at the AGM as well. Julian Walhart, George Taylor, even Graham Park was actually there as well. But not that Graham Park actually said a word. No doubt he was wanting to be first in the queue for the buffet when it opened. So what was talked about? What was discussed? Well, it was an interesting, array of topics that were put out there, and there was some revelations that kind of came out of today's conversations and today's questions and today's answers as well. The statement that was made by John Gilligan, was interesting, shall we say? Open up. He talked about the fact that it had been a difficult year. He acknowledged there'd been significant change both on and off the pitch, and he thanked John Bennett for his personal and financial commitment to the club over the years and his service. Then the comment he then followed that up with, I think, will irritate some and annoy some fans with what he said. He said that the executive team are doing a fantastic job under difficult circumstances since the departure of James Bisgrove. Now, I honestly believe that there'll be a large proportion of the fan base who will fundamentally disagree with that comment that they are doing a fantastic job. I think, no matter what you think of what's happening on the pitch, of the manager, of the quality of players that we currently have in the squad, I think sort of a majority agreement amongst a large section of the fan base, including, of course, amongst the very influential ultras, the Union Bears, is that the executive team and the board are doing a very bad job of running this football club. A £17 million loss, a £7 million operating loss. The overruns on the Copeland Road, the overrun and overspend on Edmiston House, the sports bar falling behind due to the change of catering contractors. The list goes on and on of failures that they've had. So I think to say they're doing a fantastic job is not entirely true, shall we say. Obviously, we're all delighted that Patrick Stewart will take over as CEO and bring the experience he has from Manchester United, as well. And, obviously celebrated the good point of the unveiling of the Walter Smith statue in this last financial year. Talked about the 125 years of Ibrox and how that will be predominantly celebrated during the Dundee game. Look, there was a number of other topics, and I want to talk about some of the things that were discussed by Niels Coppen in terms of the player trading model and some of the issues that brings up. I also want to bring up some news about the change of governance of the club and how the club will be organised and how this could actually be a positive for the football club if it's done in the right way. And we'll talk about what that right way may look at. One of the interesting comments that was made, though, by John Gilligan at the at the AGM was that he wanted to see a more Scottish feel to the board and a more Scottish content to this new executive board that we talked about. Now, I don't know about you, and I'm English, yes, whatever. But I honestly couldn't give a monkey's who is on the board or who's on the executive board or who is an executive on the board of directors. If they're doing a good job, I couldn't care less if they came from Timbuktu or Madagascar or Papua New Guinea or Umbabungo land, as long as they are doing a good job of running the football club. I don't think at any point we've heard any fans call for a more Scottish board. Yes, we've heard for a more Scottish core to the team, which I understand and I support. I think, bringing in some good young Scottish players, like, we've already brought in Conor Barron, but someone like a Lyle Cameron, someone like a Lennon Miller, for example, would be fantastic for the club. And the more naturally Scottish core to the team, the better, because of the understanding they have, the understanding of the league, the understanding of the tradition of the club is clearly there. However, I think, having a more Scottish board is just, pointless. The directors have reviewed the governance of the company and the board structure will be refreshed. And I think we all agree there is need for change there, because the present structure is not working. We can see with the disaster in terms of decision making, the loss of money, the poor decisions that have been made, not just this year, but in previous years in terms of appointment of managers, signing off on contracts, etc., etc. It's currently made up of investors who have invested over the last 10 years. We are now sustainable and our board should reflect this. I mean, I'm hoping that we're sustainable. I think, a £17 million loss says otherwise. But, quite clearly there's been some financial research done here, so hopefully that is the case. A new independent non-executive chair will be announced soon to include 2 further independent non-executive directors and 2 other executive directors. Now, in terms of this new structure, in terms of appointing people from outside the football club, non-investors, kind of, business people to do a business job of running the football club, I think that's a positive. That's a big positive. However, it is only a positive to the extent of how much are they left alone to get on with the job. Now, if the board, if the likes of the Park family, my feelings on them, and the others, if this board are going to interfere with the running of the club still day to day and not give the people who actually know what they're doing the freedom to make the decisions, then I think that this won't work, and this will again be another farce, and it will fall apart, and you'll probably have people resigning and people not wanting to continue in post because of the interference. If this is going to work, and look, I think it's a good move. I think it's a very positive move to bring in people from outside, to bring in people to run the club who can do a better job than the present board are doing, because I think we can all agree that, John Gilligan is just, like I said, he's seen our old grandpa who's lost the TV remote, the Park family, a curse, and all that. But if we can bring in outsiders who can run the club, run it like a business, but still help to make profit, help to find alternative revenue streams, improve media income to the club, improve the amount of money coming into the club, then that is all positive. And, I think that is something that we can, that is a real big positive to come out of this AGM. However, like I said, it does solely depend on what independence they're given away from the board of directors. Niels Coppen obviously as well discussed the player trading model, and I think a lot of fans in the Q&A session did bring up the fact that the player trading model to this point has been non-existent. There has been no trading model. Now, I know it was mentioned 2-3 years ago, but I think the Rangers' failure to really run with it and set it up properly has cost the club millions and millions of pounds. Departures of Alfie Morelos, Ryan Kent, Glenn Kamara, Borna Barisic, John Lundstrom, to name but a few who've gone for nothing, who could have raised an awful lot of cash for the club if they'd been sold at the prime time. The inability of Ross Wilson to be a proper director of football, he's absolutely useless. And Stuart Robertson, the former chief executive officer, who was about as much use as a chocolate fireguard. So, all these people have done a disastrous job of setting up a trading model, and it has not worked. There appears to be a determination within the club to bring in that trading model now, to really develop that trading model at the club. And I think that is a massive positive, that if that can be brought in, there are players within this current squad who I believe are good enough to generate income for the club in the future, in the short term and long term. We talk about, I think, the likes, obviously, of Hiefte, I think, is a player who will generate a large amount of income over time. Raskin is, Hadji is, who else? I think Hamza is. These are players, all players, Conor Barron, all players who I think will bring in a lot of money in the future to the football club. I think I did some really reckoning with those players, and we talked, I think, between 55 and 65 million pounds, which then could be reinvested into the playing squad, which I think is a massive positive. But a lot depends on their development continuing, them improving as players, and that is down to Clement and his staff. Your feelings on that, I'm sure you will give me. And look, you all know my feelings at the moment on Philippe Clement, that he isn't doing that. He's not improving players. Niels Coppen used this slide at the AGM to kind of illustrate what had been the aim of the redevelopment of the playing squad over the summer. So that we've seen a £6 million reduction in player salary, which is positive. It seems to reduce average age, normalise wage structure, create asset value. The average age of the squad has also been lowered as well. It was 29.7, it is now 23.5. So we have a very much younger squad now, a very much more squad that is looking towards these sort of players that we can develop, players that we can move and sell on at a later date. You can see on the left of the graphic there the players that were allowed to move on, some of the more older players. And obviously then some of the younger players on the right who came into the club. Now, the issue was around the amount of money brought in for the likes of Todd Cantwell, the likes of, that was allowed to lead the likes of Sam Lammers. Now, I saw a pretty incredible stat this year that Sam Lammers has already contributed 19 goals and 5 assists to his new team, Twente. That's 24 goal contributions in the Eredivisie, which I think we all admit is a stronger league than the SPL. And he scored goals in the Europa League, including one at Old Trafford. He's showing that in a central striker's role, he was actually really effective, something that he was never given the opportunity to play for Rangers. He was again stuck out on the wing or stuck in as a 10, the position that he definitely wasn't. So, again, it's an example of a player who's come into the club, and this time it wasn't Clement's fault, it was Beale's fault, that was kind of stuck out in the wrong position, was just allowed to fester, get worse, attract bad attention. Now, look, it may have been, even if he'd been played as a central striker, that Lammers wouldn't have worked out, that he wouldn't have been a good player. We don't know. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. But the issue is that we only raised for the sales of some of those players. Now, looking at that, obviously we sold out. We actually transferred out of the football club for a fee Sam Lammers, Scott Wright, Todd Cantwell, Connor Goldson, and Robbie McCrory. They're all players that left for a fee. The actual income to the football club for all those players, which you'd expect a decent amount of money, wouldn't you, to come in for all those players? The actual sum was £800,000. That is it for all those players. For Todd Cantwell, for Connor Goldson, for Robbie McCrory. 800,000. Now, somebody's head needs to roll for that appalling figure. I mean, to sell off, and I know some of that is just that initial instalment and more money will come over time, but initially to only take in 800,000 for players like Cantwell, Goldson, McCrory, is absolutely ludicrous. It is absolutely ridiculous. And somebody's head does need to roll for that. I mean, this was kind of the statement that was made. Individual amounts are subject to contractual agreements, but 800k was what we brought in, and that's a problem and one we need to address. No shit, Sherlock. We needed to reduce the wage bill. We are seeing continual challenges through decisions made of 12 to 18 months ago. So again, this is James Taylor, the Chief Financial Officer, speaking. And he is right to that extent that over the last 12 to 18 months, I would go back as far as to say 2 years, some really bad decisions have been made at this football club in terms of salaries paid, transfer fees paid, contracts signed, players signed by, the likes, obviously, of Ross Wilson, the likes of Michael Beale, I think have a lot to answer for in terms of the recruitment into this squad and into this club that has damaged the club in the short term and also in the long term as well, financially and on the playing field. But 800 grand for all those players is an absolutely ridiculous amount. Neil Coppin also chipped in on this and said, we enter negotiations to get the best value for the club, but the reality is the market is tough and it's not always possible. Well, in that case, you say, no, we're not transferring them, or no, you're not having them unless you meet our valuation. You play hardball with these clubs. That's what you have to do. We are reviewing the academy. It's not good enough currently. Not enough players competing for first team minutes from youth, and structural changes will be made in January. Again, I find this a quite disingenuous statement, to be honest with you. Not enough players competing for first team minutes from youth and structural changes. So I would disagree with that. You've got players, I believe, that honestly are good enough to play in the first team. The likes of Bailey Rice, the likes of Archie Stevens, the likes of Cole McKinnon, the likes, obviously, of Finlay Curtis. Yet the manager isn't giving them the opportunity to do that. So to make a sweeping statement that the academy is not good enough currently and players aren't in place to compete for first team minutes, I think is a very silly statement to make. Because there quite clearly are those players that can play first team minutes, that can play at this level. And I think that a lot of the blame in terms of players not playing first team minutes, in terms of youth players not getting first team minutes, is down to the manager. Is down to the current manager, who said when he first came in January, whenever he came in first time, was it October, November time last year? I know I give youth a chance, when he has not given any youth players a chance, bar Ross McCausland, who was actually already, who he can't take credit for, because he was already playing in the squad under Beale and under Stephen Davis. So actually, Philippe Clement has introduced 0 youth players to this squad, and he's not giving any of them a fair crack at the whip. So I think that sweeping statement from Coppen is utterly false, and is actually very disingenuous in what he says. Now, Clement comes out to follow that by saying, I have a good record of giving chances to youth players, meaning at previous clubs. It's important that I do that here. Well, yes, it is, Philippe, but you're not doing it. And you've been here 12 months and you're still not doing it. So to sit there, and say that, again, you are being slightly economical with the truth. You are being Keir Starmer, in effect. There's good work being done in the academy, but bar of being a Rangers player, and our academy players currently are below that bar. I would dispute that. We want to reduce the gap between that bar. We are looking at things like satellite clubs to get youth in the leagues playing, but it's hard as we don't have the support of other clubs with that. I arrange youth to train with the first team more often and games with them, but satellite clubs would be a huge step forward. So, looking at other clubs, feeder clubs, using players outside of that. But like I said, I think Clement and Coppen have a lot to answer for on this. Philippe Clement primarily, because to say, like I said, that, that youth players aren't good enough, you can't say that because you're not seeing them play at first team level. So until you've actually seen them play at first team level and given them a chance to play, how can you say they're not good enough? I think it's an absolutely ridiculous statement from both Niels Coppen and the manager, Philippe Clement. This was another question that was asked. This time it was on the Q&A, but it was asked by the fans in attendance. There was, on the whole, decent questions this time. There wasn't any stupid Northern Ireland bus questions. There wasn't any stupid pie questions or Bovril questions or shit like that, or the vending machines not working questions, thank God. I think Trevor, somebody who asked a question about the Broom loan or something like that, the Copeland, I can't remember what it was, and the disabled facilities, and basically asking a question that had already been answered in a statement by James Taylor earlier in the AGM, was, I think, the most ridiculous question. And I think, Trevor had quite a lot of abuse on social media for asking that stupid question. Either he wasn't listening or he genuinely couldn't think of another question. Was this question here: why was the manager given a new contract while the jury was still out? The chairman responded that saying, we wanted to show that we were committed to the manager and the plan and what we wanted to achieve. Now, again, I think this doesn't really answer the question. There was no need to give Clement a new contract. He had 3 years on his existing contract. That, for me, is a commitment. 3 years is a commitment, unless we're saying that what we're doing is going to take longer than 3 years. And again, there was a lot of discussion again around, are we saying that in the short term we need to park our ambitions and park our expectations and be willing to, in effect, win nothing for the next 3 years, which is going to put Celtic even further ahead of us financially and in terms of trophies, which is an absolute disgrace. Let's face it, due to this board's mismanagement and due to the way the club has been run, Celtic are already light years ahead of us anyway. We've seen under this board the effective Espanyolification of Rangers. But I think, that again is a really silly answer by John Gilligan, but it's John Gilligan, I'm not surprised. There was no need to give Philippe Clement that contract. There was no need to extend his deal because of the fact that we already had a 3-year deal in place. So why you're spending more money that you don't need to spend, that you haven't got, makes absolutely zero sense to me. And again, is another bad decision made by the board. Now, Clement did try to kind of rail back that the responses kind of given by James Taylor, by John Gilligan and by others as regards parking ambitions and the rebuild taking time, etc. He talked about the fact that, as a football club, Rangers need to win trophies, and if they're not doing that, then they're not fit for purpose, which is right. He is right on that aspect. And, the standard is the standard. The standard is we win trophies. That's the standard. If we're not meeting that, then someone needs to pay for that. That is the plain fact of the matter. And I think there's been at times from certain groups within the fan base, and I think there is a number of fans, and we have them on the channel, that are willing to accept mediocrity, are quite happy to finish second to Celtic because it's all part of the big plan. which I don't agree with in the slightest. I have to say that question of the day goes to Declan McDonald. Declan, if you actually watch the channel now, let me know. Drop me an email. I'd love to talk to you. You're a hero to me. And I think Declan McDonald should never have to buy another pint ever. Declan McDonald said, how much of the revenue comes from the fans? Executive level mistakes have set our club back. Hard work has been thrown away. You are blind to the damage you are doing. Can you not see it's time you started selling the club? Brilliant from Declan. So that was the question, and it's a great question, and he's right. He's 100% correct with what he said, that the mistakes that have been made at board level, the failure to capitalise on 55, the failure, in effect, to quote Steven Gerrard, to fix the roof while the sun is shining, have set this club back massively and have put us in a massive financial disposition, have put us light years financially and playing wise behind our neighbours across the city. And he's right. The current board do need to go. There is little doubt that this present board need to be chased out of the club. And I find the apathy from certain individuals and groups and people pathetic, to be honest with you, towards the board. The chairman acknowledged the drop between the 55 season and is now something we're trying to manage. Well, why has it taken so long? Why the hell has it taken nearly 3 years for you to do something about it? That, to me, is just incompetence. Karim Varani said how lucky they are to have the fans who invest and spend money so much. The sentiment to fix what's gone wrong since 45 is echoed in the board. Well, it clearly isn't, because they haven't taken those steps forward. They're not investing enough. They're not backing the team enough. They're not backing the manager enough. They're not doing enough to get this team back up with Celtic. I can reassure you determination exists in the board and every staff member to work night and day to get us back where we are. Again, I don't believe him. I don't believe a word he says, because I think, again, they don't show that through their actions. And I think something that the board, that Karim Varani, that James Taylor, that John Gilligan, that the whole board need to realise is that actions speak louder than words, and their actions don't show what their words are saying. So for me, it's a bit of a false narrative. It is a bit of a false narrative when it comes to what they're saying and the way they're answering questions. I mean, I honestly believe a lot of the answers that the board gave today to questions asked by fans, even to the retarded questions, to me were a shrug, a half answer, a not even bothered kind of answer to questions. And it was just, for me, reading what they said, further, development and further positive proof that this board needs to go, that it needs gone as soon as possible. And I genuinely hope that there is somebody out there that will look to buy the club lock, stock and barrel from these absolute frauds that run the football club at the moment. The people in charge of this football club are incompetent on a galactic scale. I mean, they genuinely are absolutely massively incompetent. They need to be replaced. They are damaging the club. They are causing, perhaps it's, I'm not even saying that the damage they're doing is deliberate. I genuinely don't believe, as many of them are Rangers fans, that they are deliberately setting out to damage our football club. But what I am saying is that they are, through what they're doing, like I said, not because they're trying, destroying the club, causing damage to the club. And they do need to be gone. And we do need someone to come in who's going to make a real difference. And it is a worry. Can we find an investor? Can we find someone to come in and replace this lot? It really is a worrying situation as it stands on the competence of the board to do this. And we're hoping that that news about this new board or non-executive board may make a big difference if they're given the independence to take those decisions. Right, let's get away from the AGM, which I think has wound a lot of people up today. Looking on social media, I get that social media is a poisonous place, and I do that. And there's a lot of very, very angry Rangers fans out there. Looking at what responses given by the board and what was said today. I'm certainly hoping that John Gilligan has read the social media tonight and will do the honourable thing and resign tomorrow. Anyway, right, news of a departure. So highly been touted now in a number of very reliable sources across Scotland and across Europe is that Rangers manager Philippe Clement wants a new striker in January, that he is determined to bring in somebody in January. He sees the lack of goals, barring obviously the game against Kilmarnock, as a major concern for this football club. Hence why obviously he's experimented a great deal in past games with different strikers, Dessers, Danilo, and of course the young lad from Morocco, Mr. Hamza Igaman. Now, according to the media, Clement is determined that the board invest in January and bring in a striker who is going to guarantee them goals. Now, whether that is someone we sign or someone on loan, is open for debate. And I certainly think that won't be Lawrence Shankland, for those sorry to disappoint some of you. The striker that appears to be surplus to requirements is Cyril Dessers. As we've seen in recent games, Dessers has been dropped to the bench, and Hamza Igman and Danilo have done a very, very good job. It's also felt that, at this point in time, that this is the peak time to sell Dessers. 29 years going on 30 years, he's not going to get any better. In fact, we'll start to see a decline, I think, post 30. And also Dessers apparently is not happy that he's been dropped from the team, even though I think, he is massively, substandard and not good enough for the football club. We did have a bid for him in the summer from Atlanta United, which was accepted by the club, but Cyril Dessers turned it down. I mean, quite how he allowed that to happen, God only knows. We should have, basically kicked him out the door. But, so that it does seem that Dessers is the striker that is surplus to requirements. Now, I do honestly believe that when he was signed, yes, his wages are way too high. He was never brought in as to be the first choice striker. Now, I know there's some fans out there that love Cyril Dessers, that think he's great. And I read on social media some, people talk about him and rate him very highly. I think they're wrong. I think they're massively wrong. I think it shows a lack of football knowledge as well. But I think, the fact that Clement wants this new striker, that he wants to add a new striker, I think he's very obviously, Igaman is not going anywhere. He's seen as a project player, someone for the future. There is also, I think, a need for the club to justify the 6 million they spent on Danilo. So the likelihood, obviously, is that means that Cyril Dessers is surplus to requirements and will be gone in January. Now, I really hope this story is true. I think it'll be a great move for the club. If we can get 4 or 5 million, get our money back effectively for the player, I think that will be a very good piece of business. Again, like I said, he is 29 going on 30. He is not going to develop. He is not going to get any better. And, if we allow him to basically see out his contract on £27,000 a week, we are losing a hell of a lot of money on this player. A player we paid about 4.5 million for, which is ridiculous. But there we go. So it looks like Dessers is the player that is surplus to requirements and will be gone in January. I certainly hope that is very true. Guys, let me know your thoughts on what we've covered in the video this morning. Obviously, as this afternoon or this evening, depends, of course, when you've watched it. Let me know your thoughts on the AGM. Let me know your thoughts on Cyril Dessers possibly departing the club, please God. Look, we obviously now have to turn our attention to building up towards Sunday's game. We'll be here on the channel live streaming it, of course, as we take on Ross County, seeking to get revenge for that defeat in Dingwall. I certainly hope that we take the positive from the performance on Wednesday night against Killy into that game on Sunday, ahead of what is going to be an absolutely huge week next week against Tottenham and against Celtic in the final. Well, thanks for watching. As always, on the way out, if you can smash the like, brilliant. Sub if you haven't done already. Remember, it is all free here. We do not charge for content. We do not hide behind paywalls. We do not ask you to pay to watch. Okay, if you do want to support the channel, become a member for 99p, less than a cup of McDonald's coffee. Super thanks below the screen. Donate a little bit of money to the channel. All helps out, guys. And remember always, please never forget, we are the people.